Hey guys, today I thought I would show how I make my comics, and possibly that could give you ideas how to improve, or maybe you just don't know how to get started. Whenever I get an idea, I like to just start scribbling it, sketching it out as fast as I can. I sort of skip the writing it all out in just word form. I sort of mix combination of scripting it out with storyboarding. So I have just a bunch of these little crappy spiral notebooks. I probably have a dozen of them just full of comic ideas that I sketch out just so I can get my idea down. Now I'll show you a couple really quick examples. So here's one that you can just get the idea. I just basically in comic book form, I just go along and start drawing as fast as I can. If I make mistakes, I'll either just scribble it out and keep going, or I'll just leave it in, because right now here's another one. Like I said, I have at least a dozen of these and completely full of ideas. It's hard to come back and finish them sometimes. I have so many ideas that I'll never be able to actually go back and redraw them all well. But I do have a lot of ideas, so I want to get them down. And, basically like this. This is me just scribbling as fast as I can. Sometimes I'll even use stick figures, and I'll have the drawing right here, and then I'll write notes up here of what I want them to really be doing or saying, because sometimes, if it's a stick figure, I'll write who this stick figure is. For me, that's the best way I can do it. I know some people have a much stricter form, and I'll explain their form. A lot of comic artists like to start with a story almost like they're writing a movie script, and it's just a bunch of words where it says this character does this. Let's say the hero opens the door, walks in a room, and he sees the villain, and then they'll write dialogue. Hero says, stop right there. Villain says, how'd you find me? Blah, blah, blah. They write every word down, and they write how to show it and try to write how to explain it. Then they do a storyboard to try to get the basic idea of what's actually going on in sort of a simplified drawing form. Then they go back and start drawing it better based on the storyboard, making improvements, because sometimes you'll have a scene where something happens and it just won't look right, whether it's you want it from a different angle or whatever. You kind of got to think of it like a movie but in stills. Basically I just start with a storyboard almost, and if I go back, and if I want to change anything, I'll make notes all over my notebooks and pointing to where change the angle of this one or that one. Then I simply start redrawing it. I'll take a pencil. Some people like to use mechanical pencil like this. I prefer these little green drawing pencils and eraser, like this. I prefer hard lead because you can draw much lighter and it's a lot easier to ink over. If you use the soft lead, it's going to be really dark and smudge all over the place. That's just a little tip I learned a long time ago. Hard lead is way better for if you have to ink over it, and there will be a lot less you have to erase later. So after I just draw it all, I'll go back over and ink it. Here's just a sample of something I worked on. I'll just simply ink all the outlines of, I'll even do the borders and stuff. Sometimes I'll draw the speech bubbles, but after doing this for a while, I realized it's better to save the speech bubbles, just leave them completely off and add them later. Always make sure there's a little bit of room for them, but just leave the speech bubbles out. You should just add those later, but make sure you know what your characters are going to say. You can always change that later. So after I get it inked, I'll go over and erase it, but you got to be careful with the erasing because sometimes it'll actually lift some of the ink off, and when you go to scan it, it won't scan that good. I already have a problem transferring drawings to a digital media. I swear, every time I do it, no matter what I do, it's kind of a little bit pixelated. No matter what scanner or software you use, it'll never be as smooth as your original drawing. Anyways, what I do next is scan my picture, and in the scan settings, I like to set it to black and white so it scans in black and white right away. Some people prefer to just scan it in color, fix it in Photoshop later. I've tried that, but it seems to me like more work. Or they'll do it in grayscale, which is also, it's similar, but there's still like random little specks of color, or not color but gray tones that aren't supposed to be in the picture, and then you have to try to adjust the brightness levels. So I like to just try to make sure my picture's as clean as possible and scan it in black and white. Then that's less things I have to do later. Next, once you get it on the computer, you open up Photoshop and go to Editor. You don't have to use Photoshop. You can use Print Shop or whatever is similar, like Manga Studio or whatever you use. There's a ton of them out there, and as long as you have some way to edit, you should be fine. Alright, now I'm gonna try to set up the camera so that you can see, and I'll show you a little bit of what I do once it's on the computer. So this is me in Photoshop. I just opened up a random picture. This is one page from my comic. So one of the first things I'll do is I'll go in here and I'll try to fix my lines, the dividing lines like this. Sometimes I try to save myself some erasing time, and I'll just draw them all the way across. I'll do stuff like that. Then other things I do is I make sure I'll go up to File or Image Size and make sure they're all the same size. On this particular comic, I tried to keep everything at the size of a paper, 8.5 by 11 inches. And so one way to make sure that is I make a blank page that's 8.5 by 11, and then I have a 1/2 inch border around it, and I'll insert all my drawings into that same page so they're all that way, and just make sure you save them as a different file name. So another thing I do is I'll go in here and I'll start adding some tones just to make things a little bit different. Like these vine things are darker, and the wall in the background is I'll make that all a tone. I can even do each brick slightly different if that's the look you're going for. I won't go into too much of coloring and shading, but I do like to separate certain things, especially if something's really dark or something's really light. It's got to either be black or white. But I do use gray tones to separate other items. You can add halftone pattern, and that's a way to shade. That's kind of like the closest way to make it like old school, using the halftone patterns, because that's the only way they used to be able to shade. So after I get all my tones and shading or whatever I need to do done and all my little fixes, the most important thing about Photoshop is fixing all the mistakes that you have. It's one of the best tools for modern comic artists. So make sure you take advantage of it. Make sure you fix all your little scribbles or accidents. I have a page of a few that I just drew myself, and I'll just like take one of these, cut it out, then put it in the appropriate spot, and then after that, then you can write the text over the speech bubbles, and that way it'll be in another layer, and you can move the speech bubble around, play around with it. You can change the text, move that around too. That's why after I've done this for a long time, I started realizing drawing the speech bubbles in the comic while you're first drawing it, it can really mess you up, because if you can't get that speech bubble out of the way, you're either going to spend a long time trying to erase it to move it, or you're going to just have to deal with it and just put your words in there and realize that it's either in the wrong spot or taking up too much space. After you're done with the file in Photoshop or whatever software you use, you can convert the file into the appropriate file types. A lot of them you have to convert to PDF to be able to print on demand, but you can go to a lot of print on demand sites. There's CreateSpace, there's a couple different ones on Amazon. Just do a little bit of research, see which one's the best for you, or at least if you're trying to get a publisher to look at it, at least you have it all in one file and in the right format and everything's in the right size or shape. That's about all the tips I can give you. That's how I do it. Not everyone does it the same. Some people do it a totally different way. The outcome is always going to be different, but regardless of how you do it, the more time you put into it, the better it's going to look, and the happier you'll be about it. Hopefully I can make more videos soon. Until next time, see you later.